Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. Very excited, very excited for this one. It blew up, of course. I think we had almost 1,500, Becc, which is pretty insane.
Awesome.
I think we got close to that mark. How are you doing today, Becc?
Despite the infelicitous vicissitudes of what's going on in the world right now, I'm doing great. My coffee's here. It's so strong, I think I'm going to grow a mustache. So feeling good.
Is this the coffee that you got the guy who owns the coffee shop to open his coffee shop for?
True story.
That's
I called him.
good.
I'm like, look, I tried making my own coffee and it just isn't working out. And so he opened it. So shout out to Cup of Joe downtown in SF for opening the store to give me some caffeine.
I love it. I love it. And if you know Becc, you know how important her caffeine is to her. Very important. So I'm glad you're well caffeinated. And I can see everyone kind of pouring in now. And I'll get a few kind of housekeeping things out of the way before I let you drive, Becc. So again, welcome. We're going to be talking about sales and marketing alignment. I promise it will not be like any other sales marketing alignment webinar that you've been on. We walk through this content. It's fantastic. Excited to get through it. Quickly, housekeeping. So these are recorded. We will send out the recording within 24 hours. So if you have to go babysit your kid or go close a deal or whatever it is you have to do right now, it's okay. Go make that happen. We'll send this out. And last but not least, so Becc and I are lucky enough that we talk all of the time. I get to pick her brain all the time and we chat back and forth. So we're doing this for the community. And we want you very much in the driver's seat. We have a great meaty deck to go through, but if you have any questions throughout, please let us know. It always makes it way more fun for us when there's good audience engagement. So right now, if you want to jump over to chat, let us know who we're hanging with. Name, title, what company you're at. Light us up on the chat, please, and we'll do some shout outs, and then use the Q&A for any questions that you have. And now, introducing my guests, I'm joined by Becc Holland. Becc, welcome again. You've been. This is 2 in 1 month now on Sales Hacker.
Yes,
we're lucky. We're lucky to have you. Can you give the quick background of this very cute girl? I just saw it's a picture of you. That's amazing. How did you become Becc Holland? What's going on? Quick superhero origin story for those who are unfamiliar with the Becc Holland.
Yeah, that was a game time decision. I actually made the decision about 4 minutes ago on the picture, so I wanted to surprise you. So hi everyone on the line. My name's Becc. That is a picture of me when I am like 4 or 5 years old. You know, pumped, ready, zero friends, like just like. But a little bit of an origin story as far as career. I graduated from A&M in 2008, which was a rough time. Came into the world as a seller, was an account executive for a couple of enterprise companies where I sold anywhere from 2 to 20 million enterprise level deals to retrofits, actually, mechanical construction. I don't know if you know this, Scott, but yeah, so that's where I began my sales career, learned Sandler, learned, spin selling was all the rage during the time, but then transferred out to the Bay Area. And I said, I'll give 6 months to sales development, 6 months to take a step back, understand the ecosystem and what tech is. And I'm going to be strive to be an AE in, 6 months again and start closing deals. But that's where, I really fell in love with sales dev and just the program and the spot, within the funnel that it was. So I've been doing a couple of leadership positions, got to build out a global team and transitioned over to a sales tech company, another MarTech company, and now landed here at Chorus where I run the sales dev team.
I love it. And Becc creates amazing content. If you can check out her community, Flip the Script. She's got great videos and things up. We were lucky enough to jump in a bus together and travel around North America before this all went down. And it's a lot of fun. So everyone check out, we've done some webinars with Sales Hacker, with Becc, personalization at scale, a whole bunch of really cool ones. But we've got the new topic and I'm excited to dive into it. Quick shout out. We have so many people joining us. So we got Michael, Elizabeth, Aisha, Paxton, Kobe, Sunny, Nikki Ivy. What's up, Nikki? Quentin, Kareem, Dylan, and Chris. List goes on. Thank you all for joining us. We're excited to have you. Keep the great engagement coming. And again, if you have any questions, use the Q&A, please, and thank you. All right, Becc, I'm going to shut up and let you do your thing and periodically poke at your content. Let's see it. I'm pumped.
Sounds good. So I actually asked a lot of heavy hitters in terms of personal brand in the industry to attend. So I know Lori Richardson's on the line, Scott Leese, Richard Harris, Gabe Larson, Eric Gilpin over at Up. Yeah, so I'm really excited about today's topic. I think it's a huge gap, whether we like it or not, and whether we voice our opinion or not. The driver behind this was originally, this is the main topic, I think, in the industry is like funnel and how do you improve the funnel. I think it's less of a personality game at this point, and like, how do we, line up metrics to make everyone happy across the funnel. But I'm really excited for the content today. I wanted to start with, if everyone wouldn't mind going into the chat, and if you could give me a good marker, give me a number 1 if you are on the marketing side of the house, number 2 if you are the sales side of the house, and number 3 if you are business development.
Wow.
So we got a mix. We got a mix. Yeah.
Going crazy. I'm not sure if your brain can calculate that data so fast. What percentages are we at, Becc? Come on.
Well, let's see. Someone gave me a 4. So I think they're confused. Okay, that gives me a good mix. So it looks like we're evenly split marketing, sales, and business development, which really excites me because I think, this is, again, less of a personality problem, more of a structure problem. So today, as far as the content, I hope, that we can unpack some things that you guys haven't seen before. But we're going to go through 7 different steps of how you can close the gap between the 2 departments. And I want to give a quick shout out to, the team over here at Chorus. I'm not up here alone. I am standing here, on the shoulders of our marketing team and our sales team, both of which I'm very, very heavily involved with. So, and if you don't believe me, think through who made the deck for me for today's session. It was definitely the marketing department. So, I think Chorus has given me, the leeway to try some new interesting things and really been bold enough to say like, hey, okay, this is a problem and how do we close the gap? So I'm just really excited to be up here with both of those teams on the line. So the first step we're going to go through is how to redefine ICP. Think of it in terms of 4 buckets. First, we're going to redefine some terms and define what quality is. So we're going to redefine ICP, redefine MQL, and put in a decline lead process and talk about personal emails whenever you're gating some content. The second step is we're going to relearn how to KPI marketing. How do we measure marketing against that term of quality, what quality is for our sales department? We're going to then transition on to how do I message these quality leads in a way that drives more conversion? And then the 4th step is how do we make marketing decisions based on the results that we're going to get? So let's start off with redefining, let's start off with what sales says about marketing. Whether I like it or not, I go to LinkedIn and every once in a while I'll see a LinkedIn post where someone's like, no, our sales and marketing department is actually super tight. And, there's a picture of them hugging or whatever. But, behind the curtain, I've worked with a lot of sales team and resoundingly across the industry. These are the 3 things that I get back from sales teams. They say like, hey, they don't send enough leads. They don't send quality leads and it just isn't working. So typically what I've seen in the industry is like, VPs of marketing are like cheering on the line and they're like, hey, we hit our MQL number and we did better this year than ever and more, influence pipeline than we've ever had or, pipeline created than ever before in history. The sales dev team is cheering a little bit less, but they're still cheering. They're still moderately happy. And then the sales team is bawling their eyes out and, some of the sales reps aren't hitting quota. And oftentimes, the data says that it's anywhere from 12 to 17 months that a VP of sales is churned based off of quota attainment. So that's how you know there's a problem, is if one team is cheering a little less, and then the VP of sales is being churned, this, becomes a funnel issue. Now let's transition to what marketing says about sales. Marketing says, well, hey, sales teams don't follow up with leads. They don't read the content that we have. They don't use the appropriate content in the right, case scenario. They're unaccountable. They're unhelpful. They don't show up to events on time. They're, selfish and only, serve the initiatives that they want to do. And I think it's pretty drastic, but I want to include it. I've even heard before of like, hey, they're overpaid. They get way more money than we get on the marketing side. And they're all about the glory, whenever a deal closes, and they forget about all the teams that led up to that close. So the first step, how we can help with this pandemic, or no, I can't use the word pandemic, but this massive issue that we have in the industry, is we can start by redefining what ICP is to include titles. So I'm going to go through all these slides, and first I'm going to unpack what is typically done in the industry, and then I'm going to give you a new plan to fix that. So what we currently do that we shouldn't do is, typically a marketing department is going to define ICP as a great company, and they're going to define ICP. For those in line who haven't heard ICP, it stands for Ideal Customer Profile. They'll identify ICP as a good company, and someone who has downloaded a lot of content, and someone who has downloaded relevant content. So, and they'll call this lead scoring. They typically will lead score a lead based off of, is this, a really good company, and is this person downloading content that's very, very relevant to what we sell as a product? And so what ends up happening to the sales development team and the sales team is, hypothetically, let's say an intern over at Oracle who is downloading a lot of your content would be netted to the top as a very, very high value lead. So, being a sales rep, or a sales rep in the past, one of the things that I learned very early is that title matters, and where someone is in the organization absolutely matters, in their buyer persona matters. So, what we should do instead here to solve that problem is, instead of just including, okay, what kind of content is this person downloading? What kind of, is it relevant content? Are they downloading a lot? And are they a good company? I want to break down ICP to mean two things. So this is what we do over here at Chorus. I've broken them down and made up two terms, ICC and ICT. So ICC, let's start there. ICC stands for Ideal Customer Company. So let's start on the company level. So I usually base this off a firmographic criterion that matters to the sellers. So a couple of examples below here are, company size matters to a seller, or company industry often matters to a seller, or company tech stack. But basically, you want to define someone do they work for a company that we really want to sell into? And you want to coin that as ICC. And the other piece that you want to add to the equation is ICT, Ideal Customer Title. So this is all based on the role and the title criterion of who you best sell into. So a great example, and I'm going to use Chorus all the way through just so you guys have an example of what we do. But for instance, over here, we want to sell into manager level and above. We sell to managers really well. We sell to directors really well. We sell to heads of really well. We sell to CXOs really well. And our 5 buyer personas are sales enablement, sales leaders, SDR leaders, revenue leaders, and operational leaders. But without fail, one of the things that everyone is considering in the industry is, does someone have decision-making power? Is this the person that is the person I'm talking to have the right, to sign off on this deal? And that greatly influences deal cycle. It greatly influences whether something closes or not. Did you start at the right level in the conversation? So the age-old sales methodology is, you should start, in the top and then get passed down, as opposed to start in the bottom and then try to work your way up the channel, just because of the level of the authority in the room. So the first thing you want to do when it comes to your ICP, you want to break it down into 2 different buckets. Does this person work for an ideal customer company? And do they have an ideal customer title? So for Chorus, that would be, do you have over 100 employees? do you work in tech is who we like to sell into or we sell well to. In tech stack, we like someone who has a dialer or someone who has a web conferencing system like Outreach or Zoom. And then is this person a manager level or above? Do they actually manage a team?
I love it. And quickly, Beck, we have a question from Nick Costa. Nick, great question. What do you find are the best methods of figuring out a prospect's existing tech stack?
Oh, that's a great question. It's actually the toughest to find out beforehand. There are three ways that you can do it in my experience. It's a really good question. DataFox can give you that information. G2 Track can give you that information ungated and free of what the company uses. And I believe Crunchbase can also give you that information. And I think Clearbit also contributes to it. So I'm not necessarily a tech expert, but those are the ones that we're using beforehand to understand, like, tech stack, I think, again, is one of the most difficult things to understand about a company, especially because it changes so frequently. But those are the sources that I've used in the past.
Yeah. And I think Sales Nav might have one. People are jumping in. Datanyze. Apparently, it's built in Discover Org, Zoom Info now.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, there was, depending on what you're trying to locate, there's a hacky Google Chrome thing called Built With that I used to use to find certain things. That was a good one.
I've built with and Datanyze in the past. Yeah. So all good sources. And I think it's a really, really important piece. But my perspective is it's the hardest piece, even for all of those companies to track, just because it changes out so often. So, any of those are good options. The second step is you want to redefine MQL, and I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for this, but you want to redefine MQL, which stands for Marketing Qualified Lead, to exclude lead scoring and to exclude companies that you have sold into already. So typically in the past, marketing will qualify what's called an MQL, Marketing Qualified Lead. They will say it is either number one, someone who downloads our content or attends a webinar or attends an event. Number two, someone who downloads a lot of our content or webinars. Sometimes they'll put a threshold of like, you have to download 5 pieces of content, to become an MQL. Or best case scenario, they'll say if this person hits ICC, if this person, is part of a company that we want to sell into. That's the best case scenario that I've seen for marketing departments. So again, whenever I'm a seller, you want to define an MQL as someone that your selling team wants to sell into. So instead of basing it off of how much content and getting, interns over at Oracle, let's say, on the line and handing them over to sales dev and saying this is an MQL, you want to redefine MQL to someone who, number one, has the correct title. They hit ICT. So again, for Chorus, that's manager level and above. Number two, they hit the minimum bar of a company you want to sell into. So it's 100 employees or more. They have the right tech stack, in the right industry. And then the third piece you want to add into for lead generation purposes is this someone who we have not already sold into? Is this a Chorus customer? Or is this someone who's already in cycle? So this is going to be a really high bar for marketing, but it's a very, very accurate bar of salespeople, they're tasked with closing net new ARR. So even if someone is an SVP of sales over at a 2,000 person company, if they're already a current customer, then of course we want to enrich them as a customer. We want to add to them in terms of thought leadership, but it does not enhance the chance that a closer can close more business because we've already sold into them.
I love it. We've got some great questions, and people are keeping you on your toes. I like how thoughtful these questions are. People are really paying attention. Beck, here's one. Many managers, directors, and head of CXO delegate. How do you handle those leads come in? Maybe that intern from Oracle is tasked with a project to check out for their CXO.
Yeah. So I would say there's one time in my career that an intern actually worked out and got me into the right room. And that's one time, and I've been selling for 12 years.
Yeah.
So I would say it's the exception, not the rule, for sure. And so I always want to cater to what's going to, on average, give me the most accurate representation, for what's going to lead me best into the deal. That person is right. Like maybe an intern can get me into into the right circle. I'll never forget, it was a person who inbounded, and they were an intern from the New York Post, and their aunt was the decision maker. And they checked us out. This was at my first MarTech company, and they passed it on to their aunt. But I mean, to be fair, they were family with the decision maker. So I think there's an unrealistic tie there. So I would say, yes, people always want to pass you down, but as a marketing team, you always want to define, is this a high value prospect, whether we could get a meeting with them or not, whether we could close them or not. Is this someone that we would want to sell into, so you can give an accurate representation of the efforts that your content or your webinars or your events are really causing.
Love it. Love it. Last clarifying is, and I think we'll get to this a little bit, but shouldn't those who we've been sold to be directed to customer success? And Andrew kind of has the same question in the Q&A. Are we not hamstringing ourselves with cross-sell and upsell if we suppress all current customers?
Yeah. So again, you don't want to suppress them from downloading your content or attending a webinar. You just want to suppress them from being counted against a new lead generation goal. So what I've done in the past, and Scott, I think we've talked a lot about this.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a very new system for people, what I'm pitching today. That would be an even more aggressive system of, hey, if someone downloads our content and they're a part of another department for, let's say, an enterprise company, I would route it to my RM, AM, cross-sell, upsell, renewal team and say like, hey, this person, use that as a lead generation piece for them, or use it for a lead generation piece for the BD team. But as far as a marketing team goes, typically that's just not the case. But you can do that if you'd like.
Love it.
So let's keep moving to make sure we stay on time. The third step is you want to put in a declined lead process for marketing. So when it comes to sales development and sales, their relationship happens like this. A sales dev person sets a representative, sets a meeting with a prospect. They send it over as what's called an SQL. And an SQL means, hey, I think that I just set a meeting with someone who is qualified. And then the sales rep, on the back end, once they have the appointment based on a certain amount of criterion, and it's different for every company. Some people use BANT, which is budget, authority, need, and timeline. Some people use, was this the right title? Some people use, was this the right company? Did they have the right tech stack? Another topic for another time. But they either on the back end say, hey, this is an accepted lead, and this is an SAL or an SQO is what I've heard, a sales qualified opportunity, or this was not a qualified lead. And they say this is an SDL, a sales decline lead, or a DOA, dead on arrival. And that's what causes a funnel. So sales development says we have 100 meetings that we've set for you that we think are qualified. And sales will say, let's say great case scenario, 90 of these were qualified. So 90 of them are actual opportunities, and 10 of these, because of whatever reason, it's different for every single company, were not qualified. You want to mirror that process onto marketing. So whenever marketing sends over an MQL, they say like, hey, I think that this is a person who has the right title, who is a part of the right company. They hit ICC, they hit ICT, and they send over what's called an MQL. This is a lead that I think that downloaded our content that hits the criteria that we want to sell into. And you want to have sales dev confirm or deny that. So before everyone burns me at the stake here, when you think about a funnel, every single progressive box of the funnel is a limited portion of the piece above. So when it comes to SQLs, for instance, we pass through SQLs, and sales out of that pool says, 90% of these were qualified, and we're going to deem these as an SAL. But with marketing, for some reason, I've seen for departments, they say, hey, we created 1,000 MQLs, and the next piece of the funnel is the exact same piece. So you want to put in some kind of process where basically sales development can confirm or deny. And I would always suggest for both of those hinges that you choose objective criteria. You say like, hey, this was someone who was over 100, employee size. This was someone who had the right technographic setup. This was someone who has the right title. And they're very hard criterion. They're not subjective criterion, because if you go into subjective realm, this could be just in my experience, but you get people who, because they're based on conversion rates for sellers, for instance, they'll want to qualify near the very end so that their conversion rates are really higher. The same for sales development. So I would always suggest choosing very hard firmographic or demographic based on title criterion, but you want to instill a process where sales dev can tell marketing, hey, actually this person was a part of a, let's say 80-person company, or this was an individual contributor, this was an account executive or a BDR. We absolutely love them, but it's not someone that we can set a meeting with. If we set those kind of meetings, our reps would be mad because they'd say, hey, this is someone who's on the front lines, super valuable for threading, super valuable for in terms of influence and championship within the org, but not someone that we want to choose to have an initial meeting with if we had to choose. So you want to create the decline lead process. I've seen a lot of teams say like, hey, we don't have a great feedback process from sales dev to marketing. And so what they'll do is jam them into like a bunch of internal meetings, and it's like, look, we just need to have, from an automation perspective or from a hard sales criterion perspective, a feedback. And the feedback, comes when we say this is an MDL or this is a marketing accepted lead, one of the two.
Love it. And Becc, so first off, you went over Graham Gilovitz. Graham says he loves this. So you're blowing Graham's mind. He does have a question, though.
Yes.
And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least touch on this quickly. And we won't spend too much time. But Graham says, do you think this all goes out the window with COVID, where companies might be scrambling just to secure new business?
Another topic for another webinar. You're right.
But at Chorus, you shared that you guys are still hitting all your targets, right, exceeding targets.
I mean, to be honest, yes. So I mean, COVID is kind of another session for another time. And Graham, I'd say hold tight, because Scott and I were thinking about doing something on how to pivot during COVID. But just a couple quick tips before I move on here. Number one, I would be rethinking 4 things. Number one, I would say your objections are going to be realer than ever. Usually I give people the 95-5 objection handling rule. If 95% of the time the objections aren't real, like no time, not interested, send me an email. But you're going to get more real objections than ever. You're going to get, budget freeze, hiring freezes, etc. So I'd say be aware of that. Number 2, I'd say you need to pivot your value prop into what your buyer's reality is right now. So for instance, over here at Chorus, we used to have a value prop of we make sellers better. I repositioned our entire value prop to how we help sell remotely better. So like we, infuse accountability or help cross-team collaboration or help coaching remotely. So I'd be rethinking what is my value prop and how can I, transition that over into a remote world. And then number 3, and then we can go on, I would say I would use some kind of push-pull technique where at the end of my email, and my experience with COVID, if you mention COVID, then people say you're trying to monetize a disease. If you don't mention COVID, they say you're insensitive. So where I would lie in the middle is I would reposition my value prop to all remote. And then on the back end of the email, I would say either way, after your CTA, like after you say like, hey, do you want a meeting Wednesday at 2? I would say either way, I hope you're well, whatever, doing safe during this time, so that you can kind of give that reprieve to your contacts. But to your question, the structure stays the same. How we value prop might change, but I still think that marketing should be, held to the standard of like, are we generating new leads in business that our salespeople can sell into? They don't have to be attributed to the results of those leads of if we booked the meeting and if we closed the deal, but they do need to be responsible for what kind of marketing did they do, and what was the result of that marketing? What kinds of people were downloading the content? So let's move on because I know we're cooking here on time. The 4th step that I would put into place is not accepting personal emails at the gate. So a gate, for everyone on the line who doesn't know what that is, when someone downloads content and they have to put in their email address or put in some certain kind of criteria, or like, name, title, company, etc. That's what marketing calls a gate. And so a lot of companies at the onset will say, hey, we are going to allow people to download our content with a personal email address. But if that person, downloads with a personal email address, we're going to say that's a junk lead. and we're not going to call on them because they're a junk lead, and we're just going to nurture and nurture and nurture them because they're a junk lead. But the result is, and I put it here below, let's say Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, tried to download your content. He puts in his personal email address of Mark Benioff, I'm a badass.com. I'm a badass.com. Marketing would say, well, this is a personal Gmail address, so he's a junk lead, and nobody would call on him, because he put in his Gmail address. So let me just say this. Every single one of your decision makers has a personal email, period. I have a personal email, VPs of sales, CROs, CSOs, VPs of customer success. Every single person that you want to sell to has a personal email address. So to me, if someone puts in a Gmail address, it doesn't communicate that they're necessarily unqualified. All it communicates to you is that they didn't want to give you their real company address. So you can do two things in this case scenario to fix this. Number one, you can just require a work email to download your content. And again, before I get burned at the stake here, if someone's not willing to put in their company email to download your content, I'd argue they're probably not willing to buy your product. Or if someone doesn't have a company email, in most cases, unless you're B2C, I'd argue that they probably aren't a qualified lead for you. So, over here at Chorus, it's like, to get into any kind of content or webinar, someone has to put in their company email, and it all comes down to the language. I would say something like Scott tries to put scottyb@gmail.com into the gate, and then we pop back and we'd say, oops, we need a company address to download our content so we can nurture you to death, or so we can hammer you with calls and put like a smiley face. It all comes down to the language that you use. Make it fun, make it playful. But I would if it were me, I would require a company email at the gate for our content. So a lot of marketers on the line are going to say, well, that's going to it's going to lower our numbers of content downloads. So for all the marketers who are out there saying like, hey, this is going to diminish our content downloads or webinar registrants or et cetera, if you just don't want to do that and aren't comfortable with it, I would suggest using Clearbit of, let's say that Scott enters in his email and his name. You can use a service like Clearbit to say, to back enrich the data and say, okay, Scott Barker, who is he? I'm going to scrape, what company is he a part of? Oh, he's a part of Sales Hacker and Outreach. How many employees do they have? What is his title? Is he objectively qualified? And then pass it through the same. So this is a little more complex, and you're going to have to buy Clearbit data enrichment in terms of forms, or I've heard Matt Kudu can do it for about the same money. But if you just aren't comfortable with making people require an email address a company email address on the front end, then I would suggest back enriching the data so you can say like, holy crap, this is Mark Benioff, or holy crap, this is Jack Dorsey, and he just downloaded our content and he's absolutely qualified for us to call on. So not taking it as a sign that this person is unqualified just because they put in their Gmail address.
Love it.
So that is how to redefine the terms. But now let's get into the fun stuff of how to KPI marketing. Now that ICP is someone who, is part of a great company, and a great title with ICC and ICT. Now that an MQL is someone with a great company, great title, and someone we haven't already sold into or aren't currently in cycle with, because it's true lead generation. Now that we're not accepting personal emails, at the gate, we have a good definition, and we have a decline lead process in. We have a good definition for, are these people qualified? So how we want to KPI marketing is the following. How people currently KPI marketing is they measure marketing on MQLs created. And again, they define MQLs as anyone who's downloaded content. Or they measure marketing on hypothetical pipeline, meaning, a certain amount of people downloaded our content and they are all a part of these companies. And if they close, they would be worth this. So I'm going to say this is the pipeline that was generated, regardless of the results, whether someone was able to book a meeting or whether someone was able to close a deal. Or in the most progressive cases that I've seen, marketers will be a martyr. If they have been on the sales end before, they're going to say, you know what, I'm going to tie myself to closed won revenue as a piece of their KPI. And it's like, whoa, I asked you to jump in the pool, not drown everyone in it. So in the close one revenue bucket, I think it's an unfair to marketing that they have to be measured by someone else's skill. They have to be measured by, was sales development, good enough to book a meeting, and was my closing team good enough to actually close the deal? So instead of that, marketing, there's two functions from my perspective, or there's two goals of marketing. Number one is general brand awareness, which is much harder to measure. I heard a really smart marketer once say that measuring brand awareness is like asking someone to attribute the one thing their mother did when they were growing up that made them know, that signaled to them that she loved them. And I'm like, that's fair. Like, when I think through my childhood, I'm like, oh, there's a ton of stuff. I don't know. She showed up at my soccer games, and, she was too much in my business and always made me do my homework and, whatever, certain criterion. But so marketing, from my perspective, you should, KPI it somewhat on brand awareness. So I would say, and I put an example here, I would measure marketing 25% or 20% or 15% on brand awareness. And I would say brand awareness, we're going to base off of the volume of people that downloaded our content, attended our events, or attended a webinar. So 25% of my KPI of marketing is like, my goal is, so for instance, for the webinar today, it'd be like you said, 1,500 people registered for it. So 1,500 would be my total. It's not an MQL, but 1,500 people attended the webinar. So from a brand perspective, people probably know on the line Chorus a little bit more. Sorry, not to ostracize anyone on the line, but 1,500 people probably know Chorus a little bit more. So that's the brand awareness piece. But the lion's share of how marketing should be measured. So I put an example here of 75%. I mean, over here at Chorus, we're 85-15. 85% of our KPI is out of the 1,500 people that are on the line, or out of the 1,500 people who attended this webinar, how many of them were a manager level and above 100-person company? Not that we devalue everyone who is under that, but that's who we can sell into, or anyone who's a current Chorus customer. So we want to take out all of those people. And in my experience, I mean, I've seen teams be cut down from 2,000, all the way down to like 80 before. So great example. So we just did this flip the script tour. Me and Scott went across the nation, and we, went to 9 different cities, and, had packed rooms the entire time. And it was like, we had upwards of 3,500 people across the tour attend. When I put this criterion in and said, well, I want to know who wasn't a Chorus customer, who was manager level or above, who's with an ICP, and, who was above 100 person company, it cut us down to 350. So I'm not here to, certainly not here to, insult marketing. I think marketing is an absolutely vital function for our organizations. I would be nowhere without my department, without the department that I get to be a part of over at Chorus. So I want to be very clear here. But I do think there needs to be a mirror added of like, hey, out of these 3,500 people, or especially for events that are very customer heavy, how many for lead generation purposes were not a current Chorus customer, so we can understand how are we setting up our sales development team to call on these leads, and how many objectively are, how much of success are we setting our sales team up for by the events that we're doing, content that we're creating, and webinars that we're creating. Because when it comes down to it, most of the marketers that I know would have the courage to be measured against this. It's just that we have never orged the system that way. So it's like most of the leaders that I know within marketing would say, yeah, you know what? Like, they're competitive just like everyone else, like bring it on. And so what happens is you see marketers, at least I'll speak to the team over here at Chorus, you see them really role playing with the salespeople and the sales dev of like, okay, what kind of content would really hit, this pain point, so that we can make sure that we get leaders on the line. Because now, my comp, or, my livelihood over at Chorus is, predicated on how many new actual leads that I want to sell into came into the funnel via my channels. So if you want to get really, really extensive with this, over here at Chorus on the sales development team, and for the past 3 programs that I've run, I base the sales development team on a point system for their meetings. And I give them higher and lower points for on the x-axis, whether someone was a part of, had 10 to 50 sales reps, 50 to 200, or 200 plus, and what was the level of title in the room. So my reps started hunting naturally with heads of VP and CXO for 50 to 200 reps, because they got 4 times the amount of points than a manager and senior manager. You can play with these numbers as much as you want. I would just suggest having the ascending system. But I would give marketing, in a really progressive case, I would give marketing, some kind of KPI of like, hey, you have to get X amount of points, and how you get points is heads of directors, are going to get more points for enterprise brands than they are for SMB. So all of a sudden you have marketing really focused in on, not as a nice to have, but as a have to have. The content that I need to roll out needs to bring in the kinds of people, because again, my livelihood, salary, comp, etc., and reputation is based on it. So the sales leaders I've talked to, it's not that they don't like marketers, it's that they want marketers to be aligned with them and share that responsibility for whether, sales actually hits their quota. And again, the marketers that I know, would want to be a part of this party. So I would, in a progressive case, say like, I would almost start here, but then eventually I'd say like, hey, I want to reward my marketing team for getting heads up for mid-market and enterprise brands, because it's great for our company. Okay, how are we on time? Let's talk about how to message people. We got 18 minutes left.
Yeah, let's try and leave 10 minutes for questions, because we have a lot of really good ones too.
Okay,
so possible.
Let's I'm going to try and go fast. So now let's talk about, now that we have, the definition set, we have the KPI for marketing reset. Let's talk about how to message these leads. What do we say to them on the back end from the sales development perspective to drive more conversion? So these are, I call true inbound a demo request or a chat box, via Drift or Intercom. True outbound is someone who doesn't know me at all. And everything in the middle over here at Chorus, we call postbound. So this is anyone who isn't directly a hand raiser, but is someone who knows my brand. So all the postbound initiatives that we have put into play over here are listed. On the left-hand side, I put all of the initiatives that I would mention the premise. And on the right-hand side, I put all of the postbound initiatives that we wouldn't mention the premise in the messaging. So a great example of that, of one we wouldn't mention, is company funding, via firmographic trigger from Crunchbase of like, I want to talk to, it's valuable to us, to talk to people who just received funding. However, I don't want to reach out to Scott and say, hey, Scott, notice that Outreach raised a lot of money. You want to buy my shit because I sell shit for money.
Take it, sold.
Basically the premise that you're reaching out on. So these are all the different scenarios, if you will, within my outreach, or within an instance, an outreach instance. Full disclosure, I'm going to go into how you can use Outreach to do this, but you can use any sales engagement vendor, SalesLoft, Guessware Groove, Zant, to name a few. But on the left-hand side, these are all the different sequences that I build for the marketing initiatives, and that I would mention the premise. And here is the bucket 2 of the ones that trigger higher buyer readiness. Again, it has to be the right title and right company, that I wouldn't mention the premise, but I would still call on them. How we pair those together in terms of what the outreach looks like is I basically say, hi, Scott, I notice, reason for my outreach is I noticed that you attended the marketing and sales webinar over at Sales Hacker, but more importantly, and then I transition onto something that they did. So I've seen a lot of different, marketing engines say like, hey, Scott, notice that you came to Flip the Script tour, want a demo. And then they're shocked that their response rate for demo is like 0.00001. It's like, this doesn't mean that they're not a high value lead, but what it means is you need to spend some time personalizing on who this person is. And you, instead of making it all about yourself and how awesome your content was and your webinar was and your event was, you need to say, but more importantly, I want to talk about you. I want to talk about something Scott's done, because I want to make this conversation the most about who Scott is, what has Scott done to be relevant. You know, I want to make Scott the hero, not Chorus the hero whenever I'm reaching out. So I would always suggest that you mention the postbound premise of, hey, I noticed that you downloaded this content, but more importantly, I saw that you wrote this article on LinkedIn, couldn't get enough, you know, et cetera. So if you want to know more of how to personalize, there is a session on Sales Hacker Personalization at Scale that I did back in the day. So you can hear a little bit more about that, but let's just stick it there. If I would mention the postbound premise, I would transition with, but more importantly, and then go into something about them. In terms of the sequence that I would run, I do 16 steps over 21 days, more aggressive on the back end than the front end in terms of the pace of outreach. So I base this off of MJ Hoffman did a lot of research off of the different actions you should take and when. And basically his results showed him, he's the author of Why You Now, really good stuff. He basically realized that if you are more aggressive on the front end in your outreach, then you scare people off. And if you are lighter on the back end of your sequence, then you basically teach your prospects that if they just wait long enough, you will go away. So you want to flip it. So you want to be very easy on the front end, and you'll see like I almost pod these together of day one, day two. I do a LinkedIn research step where I vet different premises of who they were and things that they did that I can use in my outreach. It takes me about 5 minutes to pull 3 premises that will fuel the rest of the sequence. But I basically, I do 5 different pods. I do one on day 112. Cold email, cold call, day 889. So there's about a 6-day delta between those 2 pods. And I do cold email, cold call, day 13, 13, and 14. So about a 4-day delta. Then I go day 18, 18, 19. So about a 3-day delta. And then I do a 0-day delta on the back end for the last pod. So if you want to know more about this sequencing work and how to deploy it, you can actually, or what the follow-up emails look like. If you go to Flip the Script, Becc Holland, you Google that, how to not F up your F ups. And I go really in deep into what all of these emails, these follow-up emails and these reply emails actually look like. But as far as the infrastructure of what an average sequence looks like, these are all the steps that we take. This is for cold outbound. But the infrastructure, the kinds of actions we're taking and when is the same for all of our postbound efforts, if you will. So for content downloads, webinar registrants, event attendees, they're going to go into the same type of sequence, but the premise is going to be a little bit different. So we autofill, and this is a great example of one of our evergreen content downloads. So anyone who downloads our content in real time is flexed into the sequence. And basically what the Eat First email looks like is it says, it dynamic tags in, hi, you know, Scott, first name. The reason for my outreach is I noticed you downloaded, and there's a tag that it basically will flex in what kind of content they downloaded. And it says, but more importantly, and the rest of the email is blank. So we take off the backload of who and list cleaning and, you know, what kind of company, because we know that they've hit ICC and ICT if they are flexing into the sequence. And basically the rep, all they're responsible for is they'll see this template. It says reason for my outreach is I noticed you downloaded. It will flex in what they downloaded automatically. And it says, but more importantly, so they spend their lion's share of their time crafting the personalized messaging on the back end, you know, to make it all about the prospect to increase conversion. So I wanted to shout out, I was actually going through my instance last night. And it was shocking to me. Just to give you a litmus test, our open rate was 77% for most, is 77% and above for most of these content, you know, event attendees webinar, because we are talking about your comment goes here is like your article on LinkedIn and downloading this piece of content. And we had a 24% positive response rate for our emails. Wow. Insane. So I was just like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like tearing up at how great this, and I'm like, again, of course the reps over here, I love them. They're amazing. They're absolutely lethal. They know our buyer persona. They work hard. They're smart. Their acumen's high. but that tells me that like this will work for other teams of like, hey, maybe you have a 2% delta on the front end and back end, and that dips you down to a 21% positive response rate for your sequences, which industry average at this point, I don't even know where it is, but I imagine the best case scenario I've heard for a positive response rate is 1% for companies. So I do three different shell sequences, if you will, that pertain to marketing: evergreen content downloads, webinar attendees, event attendees are the most common ones. But again, all those different scenarios in the first slide that I did, these I would suggest crafting a scenario or a sequence for each one of these. And then the great thing, we'll talk about it on the back end, but let's talk about let's talk about it now. The great thing that you can do is after you go into all these sequences and have your reps deploy each one of these scenarios, you can basically re-rank for your reps. Like my assumption was like, okay, maybe event attendees will be a little bit higher trigger rate than a webinar registrant, but you can base it on data of like, I can re-rank for my reps. Actually, the content downloads did the best and had the best, response rate, positive response rate, and gave us the best kind of people and the most closed won deals. So actually, instead of calling on webinar registrants first, you dictate and you reorganize of like, hey, content downloads 1, webinar registrants 2, event attendees 3, like this is the order that you are going to visit these sequences for POSTBOUND. So my reps, when they come in for the day, they have rank sequences of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they don't have to do any brain work, any list cleaning. All they spend their cerebral calories on is like, what kind of message and how do I make this about Scott as opposed to me, so I can trigger more conversion. Again, visit the Personalization at Scale webinar that I did with Sales Hacker about a year ago. But basically, when it comes to picking a personalized premise, you can iron in all of these into your custom tags so that, we all know that, Scott's not going to pick up on the first call, and we don't want to have my rep researching Scott every single time that they make a call. So I've ironed it into these custom tags. And if you are using outreach, if you call them and ask for the Becc Holland special, they'll know how to, they'll know how to instruct you how to do this. It takes me 7 minutes to iron them into custom tags so that every single time I call Scott Barker, basically the great thing about outreach as a platform is it only fills in the fields that you filled in. So every single time I talk to Scott, I have these personalized premises up top. So I'd say, hey, Scott, thanks for attending the sales and marketing webinar with Sales Hacker. But more importantly, I saw that you wrote this article on LinkedIn about scaling teams effectively. But if you could scale your, blah, 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 and the value prop on the back end, so you could transition and make it more about Scott. Let's talk about re-gearing marketing spend. Can I have 2 minutes to go through this? And
you got to. Yeah. And then I'm just going to rapid fire questions. So get ready.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks for staying with me, people. So re-gearing, now we know what the definitions are. We've KPI'd marketing accordingly so that they're accountable for new general lead gen of the people that we want to talk to. And we've talked about messaging. Now on the back end, once you have data, and I would say about 3 or 4 months out is a good time to do this. Now you have the data on not only how many actual people that we want to sell into are coming in the funnel because of these marketing efforts, but you can re-gear your marketing spend to reflect what is the smartest for your decision for your company. So, what people typically do is they base marketing spend on original campaign source. Like they'll say like, hey, Scott, the first thing that he did was he downloaded this one piece of content. So I'm going to attribute him there. The industry is typically not skilled enough, or like the infrastructure isn't there where we can do multi-touch. I mean, I'm just going to call it out. Like we just aren't there yet. So so people usually say the original campaign source that I vetted him, or they'll spend marketing dollars on, volume of MQLs generated. And again, that doesn't mean someone we can sell into. For most companies, it just means someone, volume of people that downloaded it. Or they'll spend on marketing with no data. Is the secret other option that I've seen companies do. So what you want to do instead is basically, once you see all these POSTBOUND sequences, again, like I ranked of like content downloads, webinar registrants, event attendees, common VCs, IPOs, firmographic triggers, Crunchbase, the company funding, website views, email opens, et cetera. Once you have data on the back end, and your reps have been deploying this messaging for long enough, that's what I was actually doing last night is like, okay, how many meetings did each one of these content, campaigns actually cause? I would take a really, really deep look at, I don't want to talk about how many people, attended the webinar. I want to see how many actual MQLs of people that we want to sell into attended the webinar. And then what was the associated cost of the webinar? And then I can back in and how many meetings did I set off of those? And then how many deals did I close off of those? And what kind of titles did I close off of those? So that I can understand like, hey, maybe a webinar costs $1,000, and it generated only 300 actual MQLs. And one cost $15,000 and it generated 500. Well, it's like I would, put my marketing spend into the first option because per MQL that was created, it was actually cheaper to work with the first vendor. So I'd be very, very, intrinsic on what is the actual resultant efforts of each, per lead, that's CPL, or look at your CAC. But I would be very, very interested from a data perspective of like, for all of these marketing efforts, per dollar that I spent, like how much bang for my buck did I get in terms of the real people that I want to talk to that were created as a result? How many meetings did I book as a result? How many close one deals did I book as a result? And then I can back into the numbers and say, instead of going to your marketing team, ranting, saying, I need more leads and I need higher quality leads, number one, define quality for them. But number two, say, instead of going to my marketing team, which I'm on, by the way, and saying like, hey, I need more leads, I say, hey, based on the results, I need 400 webinar leads, 300 content download leads, 500 event attendee leads, whenever all this clears up, because based on those numbers, I can turn it into like what Aaron Ross was talking about in predictable revenue. I can turn it into that engine and an input output engine to where I say, I know that if I do content downloads, typically this is my conversion. And so I'm going to put this amount of dollars because I know it should on average create 1,500 webinar leads. 400 of them were new MQLs that I could work with. We booked 20 meetings off of that. And then 4 of them would close, which and back into my CAC numbers. So it really turns sales development and marketing into an input output engine, unless there's some kind of rare exception, so that you really know when I'm spending this, budget on marketing, I know what I should expect on the back end, so that I can spend smartly. So that is it. I was going to do a lightning round, but why don't we kick into Q&A?
Let's do it. All right. We have 3 minutes and I'm going to try and this will be our first one that we finish up on time. So go follow Becc Holland. She will answer your questions. Reach out to her on LinkedIn. Be patient. I know she gets a lot of messages, but do the best. And then it's just Becc.Holland at Chorus.ai. They want to.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
If anyone wants the deck from today, email me at Becc.Holland at Chorus.ai and say, what do we say? Sales and marketing deck, please, in the title, and I will shoot you over the deck over email. So anyone, It's Becc, Becc.Holland at Chorus.ai if you'd like the deck from today.
Perfect. Okay, let's do a couple here. So Remco wants to say, what is the best tool for finding the ICC and ICT? Is it LinkedIn Sales Nav? What others can you suggest? I wish it was that easy, Remco, but you won't find a tool that can define your ICC or ICT for you. That's an exercise you have to do internally based on historical data. Becc, anything to add there?
Yeah, I look at who's buying my product in terms of title and in terms of company, and like, are there any blockers that a company has of like that we cannot sell into them? And I base my ICP off of that, of like the sweet spot of who's bought and why they bought, in terms of persona, title, and company size, etc. Were there any blockers? But same as you said, and I would base my ICP based off of that.
Yeah, cool. Sean Day has a great question, very specific. If you have someone in one of your POSTBOUND sequences and they engage with other marketing content outside of the sequence, do you leave them in the primary cadence they're already in, or kick them somewhere else based off the newer engagement? Good question.
Manny's going to love this. I have talked to Manny, the CEO of Outreach, about this a couple of times, and he was amazing about it. I said, hey, there needs to be some functionality, and this would be voodoo functionality. There needs to be some functionality, hypothetically, in Outreach where you could say like, hey, webinar registrants are better for us. And so you could pull out of the sequence and you could go into the higher, trigger sequence. I mean, that is a very extensive product feature that would take quite a bit of time. And so the request has already been made. Shout out, Manny, if you're watching this, please, please give it to us. And I'm really sorry for bringing you up. But what the team does over here is basically they are looking, at like every single rep that I have, it's like most they're having, 10 a day that are coming into these sequences that actually hit ICC and ICT. So they're choosing which sequence they want to leave them and then deleting them out of the other. But I can see a world where Manny, where Manny pulls the trigger. I hope this webinar is a first step.
I love it. Great question, Sean. All right, last question, and then we'll wrap up. And thank you all for hanging out with us. It's been truly incredible how many of you joined us and you've stayed to the very end. So we really, really appreciate it. And this won't be the last time you see Becc Holland in the Sales Hacker community. We got a lot planned. Okay, Kendall Weir has a great question. Within outreach,
I love Kendall Weir. I know Kendall Weir. Keep going.
Shout out, Kendall. Within outreach, Salesforce, Marketo, any tools you're using, have you figured out how to operationalize any sort of point system? You have that point system that you use based on title, how many reps. Is that operationalized, or are you still kind of doing that manually?
You mean, so I do away with lead scoring. I don't use lead scoring. Mm-hmm. If someone is the VP
I think, and Kendall, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think she's talking about, your point system where you get like 4 points for a title at X amount of company. How does that all work on the back end? I hope I'm hearing it right.
I have operationalized it in my CRM. So basically, I have it automatically total. I've done this at a few companies now where it triggers based off of title level, and then it triggers based off of company size, and then it basically gives them a points total on the back end. So, for instance, it's like we have 1 for manager, 1.5 for director, and 2 for head of and VP, CXO, etc. And so it calculates their output in terms of quota attainment for the sales dev reps within the CRM. You can do the exact same thing for marketing of like out of these leads, 40% of them actually hit the minimum bar of what we want to sell into, but also for the associated KPI, like, they got us, different point totals. So I would say you need to have a very, very lethal and amazing ops team, period. Not even to do this, but to do anything, I would argue. So like shout out John Sweet, who's on our ops end. He's an absolute savage. Like he is so, so good. As a lot of ops leaders that I've talked to, but I'd say talk to your ops leader. And this is the 3rd company that I've actually done this with. So I know that it's not super difficult. It took him about, I think, a day in my first company, 2 days in my second company that I did this in. It was a day over here that they spun up, how to attribute the amount of points for marketing and for sales development that they achieved.
Love it. Awesome. All right. We will wrap up there. Thank you all again. Go follow Becc Holland. Keep an eye out for more Sales Hacker webinars that we'll do with Becc. We've got a lot of cool things in the works and got an interactive kind of really cool community layer thing that I'll allude to just because everyone jumped in and stayed to the end. So some really cool things happening on Sales Hacker that we'll be announcing over the next little while. If you want to get involved in any sort of beta things with us, please email marketing@saleshacker.com to be some of the first in the kind of new community we're building. Well, Becc, thank you so much for your time. Always appreciate you. Stay safe, stay sane, and everyone take care. Have a great rest of your week.